Hi guys, my name is Felix and today I'm going to be doing a tutorial showing you how to use your Insta360 One X to create high quality 32-bit HDR images for image-based lighting in your CGI projects. For this tutorial you will need an Insta360 One X camera or an equivalent type of camera. It's really more of a manual tutorial, so it will apply to lots of different types of 360 camera. You'll also need a tripod. I'm using an invisible tripod here that is invisible to the 360 camera because it's in the nadir at the bottom of the camera outside the stitching line. You will need a smartphone with the Insta360 One X app installed on it to access the camera and take the exposures. I'm also going to be using Photoshop to do the merging of the exposures we take, and you'll also need the Insta360 Studio to convert your images to equirectangular projections. So first thing we're going to do is set up the Insta360 in the location that you want to capture. As you can see here, I'm just using my living room as an example, but if you are on set, you would want to wait until the lighting department or the DOP has finished their final lighting setup and then bring in the Insta360 camera and place it in the location where the CGI is going to be located. If you're unsure about the best location to place the 360 camera, I recommend just placing it in the same location that the actor would be or in the center of your set, evenly spaced between all of your lights, so that you get the best coverage of your lighting setup in set. So once the camera is set up on the tripod, just simply turn the camera on, and with your smartphone you want to download the Insta360 One X app from the App Store, and then open the app and connect to the camera via the Wi-Fi option. Now that we're in the app, we're ready to start taking our pictures or brackets. So to start with, you need to select the settings button in the bottom right hand corner, and under where it says mode, you want to change that to photo if it isn't already on photo. Next, click on the timer button and set that to timer off. And then back in the main menu again, click on the auto button and just set that all the way, scroll to the right until you see manual and click manual. Then we want to set the ISO all the way down to the lowest it can go, which is 100. And then we want to set the white balance, which is WB, set that to, for you it's going to be something different probably, but just go with something that looks correct. For me it looked like fluorescent was the closest to the correct color white balance, but for you it might be sunny or cloudy or incandescent depending on what setting you're in, and you can always adjust this later in Photoshop. And the last thing that's really important you have to do is make sure you click the raw button at the end, so that's also highlighted in yellow. So this is all the major settings you need to do, and from here we're ready to start taking our first bracket. So before we start taking the pictures, just make sure that the set is clear and there's nobody visible and there's nothing moving around on the set, because you want to make sure that everything stays exactly the same in between each of your exposures or brackets. So the first bracket you take, you want to click on the shutter icon and you want to set that to the fastest shutter speed you can get. And this is going to vary from shoot to shoot, but generally if you're working on a shoot with some really bright bulbs, like some really bright lights, you're going to want to set this all the way down to 1/8000th of a second, which is the fastest it can go. And everything should look very dark on this first exposure. Your first exposure should be basically almost black. You should just be able to make out very faintly the bulbs in your most bright lights. Maybe if you haven't got a very bright set, maybe if you're just working like in the situation I'm in, you can start with your first bracket at 1/4000th, which would be 1/4000th of a second. Or if you need to, you can go even higher, but generally you want your first bracket to be extremely dark. And then you want to just hit the shutter button, which is the big yellow button, and it'll say capturing. And when it's finished, you'll be back on the main screen again, and you can tap back into the shutter button again, and then you want to set your second bracket. So if your first bracket was 1/4000th, then maybe make your second bracket maybe 1/1000th, or even be a bit higher. Like you can go quite high from that point. You don't have to stay in these really high thousandth of a second. You can go to a 500th, or you could even go to 240th of a second. Once you've set the shutter speed, you just want to make sure you hit capture again, so you're taking your second exposure, and Then when that's finished, you go back into the shutter again and you just select another exposure setting that's a little bit higher. Maybe you want to go with 1/100th of a second, or yeah, you can keep working your way up until you start to see the image becoming overexposed. So here you can see the selection of brackets that I took. And so I took a 4,000th, 240th, and then as it got brighter, 1/60, 1/30, 1/10, and then I did a half a second exposure, and then my last one was a full 1 second exposure, which was so blown out you can see all the way into the shadows, and that's as high as you really want to go. If you're working on an extremely dark set, if you're indoors and it's very, very dark, you may want to go even higher, just so you can fill in the shadows, so you really can see everything in the shadows, and that's perfect. So the final step we need to do now is take all the brackets we just created on the camera, bring them onto the computer, and merge them together into one HDRI in Photoshop. So the first thing you want to do on the computer is go and get the Insta360 Studio. So I think we need to just go to this link and go to downloads, and I guess go to the 1X, and you want to download Insta360 Studio. It's the Mac OS one. We're on Windows, so download that. It's going to take a minute. So in the meantime, let's just copy our footage off the camera. Here it is. We have all of our DNGs and INSP files. So we're looking for the DNGs, which are the big ones, and we'll actually use both of these files. I just go by date modified. There, so I'll just grab these captures that we just made. I'll copy them and I will put them into a new folder on the desktop. HDRI tutorial. Paste them in there. And then I'll install Insta360 Studio. So I'm just going to install it into the default location. That's all good. And I can leave that defaults. Okay, so finished. And I'm just going to run the software. So here we are within Insta360 Studio. So the first thing we want to do is just grab all these files from the camera and just drag and drop them in here. And it's going to load them in. And go into list view because it's a bit less confusing. I'll make it full screen. So here you can see we have our DNGs and our INSP files. So the DNG is the actual picture, and the INSP file is like a sort of camera metadata file used by the software and created by the camera. So we really only want to deal with the DNGs. So you can see all the different exposures here. We've got the really blown out overexposed one. We've got like a relatively well exposed shot, and then we're going down, bracketing down to extremely underexposed shot, which just captures some of the highlights. We can see like the bulb and the light there, and really faintly make out the buildings outside. So this is perfect. Just select all the DNGs by holding down Control, and then all we need to do is click this button at the top right hand corner called Start Export. So yeah, we'll just want to leave it an original resolution. Turn off automatic horizontal correction. Leave this the same. I'm going to change my destination to go into this folder and just call this stitched DNGs. And then just click OK. And it should just go through and export those. That's good, it's finished, and you can see in the Stitch DNGs folder we now have these files ready to go. Now I'm just going to open up Photoshop, and we're going to bring in those images. So under File, you want to go to Automate Merge HDR Pro, and then you get this dialog box. Browse to the desktop, HDRI tutorial, Stitch DNGs, grab these files. So where it says attempt to automatically align source images, I'm just going to turn that off because it can sometimes mean that actually misaligns some of these. This sometimes takes a while as Photoshop goes through all the different brackets and merges them together. So this is the Merged HDRI Pro dialog box, and you can see here what it's done now with our pictures. Stacked them together into this into this sort of HDRI. So we have a much different exposure with all of our exposures combined. And we really want to just be setting this to mode 32-bit. I think we turn off complete toning in Adobe Camera Raw, turn that off, and then you can adjust the default exposure. I'm going to leave this somewhere around here, I think. Just tweak it to your liking. And now we should see, this is our final HDRI. So if I just turn off our extras, this is our 32-bit per channel HDRI image. And this is good to go and export now, and you can save it as a .hdr file. So if you go File, Save As, and under here you just choose radiance.hdr, and I'll just save this into the base directory as HDRI tutorial. So I just wanted to wrap the video up by showing you the HDRI in action. So I'm inside C4D using Redshift. I'm going to drop in a dome light, and I'm just going to load the HDRI we just created and start the viewport IPR. And straight away you can see that we are getting all our reflections on this cube, and all of our light sources are looking correct. And if we can drop the exposure down, and we keep all of our highlight detail, and we can pump our exposure right up, and we keep all of our shadow detail. So it's just a very useful tool if you have a plate of footage which you need to integrate some CGI into. If you have one of these HDRIs shot, it makes the process of lighting the CGI and matching it to the plate that much easier, and you can really get some nice results if you can get this kind of material shot on set. So that's my end of my tutorial. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll have some more of these videos coming soon. So see you later.